Hello, everyone. It's Sunday once again. Welcome to another episode of Ask the Drummer. It's a lot warmer here in the UK now. It's t-shirt weather. Look at this. Woohoo. I don't have to wear my jumpers or my hoodie anymore. But yeah, uh, today's episode is actually very unusual because we're not coming to you live. I'm actually in Glasgow at the moment, or on my way to Glasgow when you watch this video. Yeah, I did a Zoom audio call or interview with our drummer guest on Good Friday, and that whole week I was so nervous because his band, so like they were regarded as angry young men of pop, and so like thinking, what if he's now a grumpy old man of pop? But he wasn't. He was so amazing and so lovely, and I really enjoyed having a chat with him. But anyways, before I give you that interview, I just want to dedicate this episode to a good friend of mine, Mel Maniego, who's sadly is no longer with us. But Mel was a super massive fan of our guest's band. Yeah, I hope wherever you are, Mel, I hope you're watching this episode. This one's for you. Yeah, so this is how the interview went. My dear friends, I give you Mr. Rick Buckler. Right. Okay, we're recording now. So, hello, Mr. Buckler.
Hiya, good.
Thank you so much for saying yes to Ask the Drummer. How are you? How are you today?
I'm good actually. Yeah, it's the start of spring. We got nice weather here, so yeah, it's all good. We finally got into the best part of the year, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I mean, it's still a bit so like I find it still a bit chilly. I think it's because I've never really been, just a slight sort of like cold weather, and then I get I get cold so like quite easily. I mean, coming originally from the Philippines because we're so used to hot weather and warm weather in the Philippines. So, um, yeah. So, do you still live in is it Woking or?
Yeah, still around the Woking area. I've moved several times over the years, but yeah, always around this sort of vicinity. Um,
Yeah.
you know what it's like. You have all your friends and relatives, and it's difficult to move far. Um, so yeah, I mean it's still in sunny Woking.
Oh, wow. Well, okay, so we're gonna start the proper sort like Ask the Drummer interview. So welcome to Ask the Drummer. Episode 77 is all about you, Rick Buckler. So is it okay if we're going to start from the very beginning? Because you were born in Woking, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Um and you and the Jam, you actually made that part of the UK famous because I think for non-British people we know Woking as the Jam. so like, can you tell us what was it like? What was Woking like when you were growing up?
I mean, it's a fairly unremarkable town, really. I mean, it's 30 miles from London, and I do remember when I was growing up that I think that was 1955 when I was born. So I can remember that there was a lot of old buildings, a lot of it needed knocking down and redeveloping, and it was a lot of terraced houses, um, a lot of light industry, nothing particularly remarkable really about Woking very much. It was close enough to London that we sort of didn't have much in the way of big entertainment centres. I mean, I think we had two cinemas, and
Oh,
that was about it really. So yeah, it was very much a sort of suburban area, I think.
was there a music venue or
No, and you know
no?
what? No, not at all. And to this day, there isn't a proper music venue to talk of. Even though Woking is quite a size population wise,
Mm.
it has small pub venues, but that's about the limit of it. I think the nearest proper venue to us is in Guildford and a neighbouring town.
Oh, right.
Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, there was never really a proper venue, and probably, and still isn't really to this day, unfortunately.
Oh, well, but have you always been into music?
I think because I grew up with I got a twin brother, and I had two older brothers, and they brought a lot of music into the house. They were listening to the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and a band called Them and Jimi
Oh, yeah.
Hendrix. So I used to listen to everything that they brought into the house. I think that was my first experience of sort of listening to music.
All right. But were you in sort of like a musical family? Any member of the family also in the band or
No, not at all. I mean, my
no?
dad was a postman. My mum did sort of light work, worked in shops, that sort of thing. Um, I mean, during the 1950s and 60s, I suppose radio was pretty much king.
Yeah.
So we listened to the radio a lot on we had a great big old radio set, and that I remember that listening to that quite a lot. That was usually always on until sort of television sort of took over. But I mean, it was no, we weren't I wasn't from a musical family at all.
What got you into drumming though? Has it always been your first love? Was there any sort of like particular moment in time where maybe you saw a drummer and then you said, "Well, this is what I wanted to do"?
Mostly from listening to records. I mean, we obviously would borrow albums from our friends and what have you. And during the 70s, the big music genre at the time was sort of progressive rock.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so a lot of my friends would listen to that, and and I suppose I was just drawn to listening to the drummer. I just liked that. So um, you know, from bands like Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and that sort of thing. I think that's what really sort of led me into thinking, well, if I was going to pick up any instrument at all, it would probably be the drums. And I started a band with one of my brothers and a friend,
Mhm.
and that was a guitar, bass, and then I just picked drums. I thought, right, that's for me. So that was it really. It was just liked listening to drums and drummers.
Yeah.
Obviously, if ever I went to see anybody play, I was always fixed on the drummer and would
Yeah.
watch what they
Yeah.
did, and you
Yeah.
can learn quite a lot from watching other people play.
And did you go for proper drumming lessons, or did you just sort of like teach yourself how to play drums?
I taught myself. I didn't have any lessons. I had a few friends that I made that were drummers and got some pointers from them, but no, nothing really sort of in the way of what you would call drumming lessons. No, I think I just watched and learned, and then sort of picked it up as I went along.
Yeah. So you had your first band with your brother and friends. Um, how long did that last?
Not too long.
No,
um,
not too long.
no, it was I think when by the time I went to secondary school, from the sort of age of 11 onwards, I mean, I sort of started getting to playing drums from that age, really. And there was a good music teacher at the secondary school who would let us into the music rooms at lunchtime, and so then you start bumping into like-minded people who played
Oh,
other instruments, drums and guitars and what have you. So
yeah.
it sort of really sort of evolved from there. I mean, the band, they did have a school band, which I used to take part in sometimes. Um, but so it was all a bit, ad hoc in those
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of early
yeah,
days, I suppose. Um, and obviously that's where I met Paul and Paul Wello, and
yeah.
he was in a sort of duet doing acoustic guitar stuff with another guy, and but they had ambitions to be, a band, a proper band, so they needed a drummer. So they had played with another guy, uh, but he wasn't really working out too well. So I think once there was an offer of a show in the local youth club in near the school,
Yeah, yeah.
I sort of stepped in from there, and it just, you know, I suppose you get the bug once we done one particular gig, I
And
mean,
you've
it
always,
was all covers. It was all Chuck Berry numbers and rock and roll
oh right,
numbers.
yeah, yeah.
Not nothing of our own in those really early shows.
Yeah, I've actually read your book, 1982, Jam. That's because that's where I saw you at the Louder Than Words festival last year, and I find it a bit sort of like sad in a way because it tells a story about you splitting up. But anyway, so from that book, it's actually it says that the Jam, known as the ultimate angry young men of pop. Can I just sort of like ask, I mean, what were you angry about? It was
Um,
all like, was it the government or the world or life?
I mean, yeah, I think generally everything. I mean, in the very early days, we would send tapes to record companies and get no response, and it seemed an almost impossible jump to come from being a little local band playing clubs to sort of, because at the time there was a lot of arena rock bands. There was Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and all these bands were way up there and playing in these huge venues. And there seemed no way that we could sort of make that leap, if you like. So we were trying to be noticed, and I think we got angry quite quickly when
Oh,
it just was very frustrating situation to be in. We were being ignored by the record companies,
yeah,
and I think there was generally a lot of discontent in Britain at that time. There was a lot of strikes. There was 3-day weeks. There was the electricity kept getting cut off. People were losing their jobs. There was Thatcherism and the mines were closing down. It was quite a turbulent social time, really.
yeah, yeah,
So I think that there was this general sort of underlying anger in the populace, really, about all sorts of things that were going on, and I think we sort of carried that through into the music and definitely the way that we played. I mean, we I suppose it's an old, we went at it hammers and tongs when we were on stage.
yeah, yeah,
It was fast, furious rock and roll. We sort of put all our anger and our energy into that. So that's how it sort of manifested, in the sort of early days.
yeah. It also says that you weren't liked by some of the clubs that you played then because apparently you're like too loud or so like you're moving about too much. So,
Yeah, we sort of, we started off doing cover versions of songs which we went down reasonably well. So we did get work in some of the social clubs in our local area, but I think we started to wanted to we wanted our own audience and what have you, and we wanted to play a bit louder than maybe they liked. We weren't sort of background music. We didn't really see ourselves as that. So
yeah,
we got
yeah,
the opportunity to move out and to move into the London pub rock scene. That suited us much better because we could start playing to an audience that actually wanted to see us, that wanted to listen to what we were doing, and we fitted in quite well because we did play sort of fast rock and roll. We was quite energetic, and there was a lot of bands in London doing that. There was the early days of the Pistols and the Clash and the Damned and what have you. So and
yeah,
we sort of discovered the punk thing that was happening in London as well, and they were similar sort of attitude to us, really, that they had an axe to grind, if you like, and yeah, so it was all very exciting. I mean, the audiences were chaotic, and but it was exciting because it was full of energy, and and everybody loved being there. So we sort of fitted in quite well, I think, with that.
yeah. Was it mainly boys who came to your gigs? Because I don't know if you remember, but when I saw you last year, I was all like in the queue. It was like a long queue, but there was no other sort like girls or female there. It was just me that said to and asked you, where are the girls? So it's like it's all men queuing up. So has it always been like that? Has it always been sort of like boys going to your gigs?
Yeah, I think it was. I think we was pretty sort of male orientated. I mean, there were a few girls, but it was a pretty blokish thing, I suppose. I mean, I don't know why that is in particular, but we weren't, a sort of like, I don't know how to put this, but I suppose we just attracted, the blokes really. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it was just the way it was. It's difficult. I mean, we didn't aim at that. It's just that I think, what with the sort of that's the sort of music that we were doing. It seemed to attract mostly guys. But I mean, there were girls in the audience, but like you say, it was mostly blokes. I think that came.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's fascinating to read that Decca actually rejected and returned your demo tape. And it was sort of like they must have been sort of like kicking themselves when the Jam became a worldwide success.
Well,
What's sort of like?
yeah. I mean, to be honest, the demos that we did in the very early days in the recording studios and the sort of tapes that we sent into to the record company, you wouldn't recognize that as the Jam at all.
Oh,
Um,
right, okay.
they were very much sort of love songs, quite musical. There's no anger in it whatsoever. The lyrics were pretty dreadful. Looking back on it, I can understand why that they sort of rejected us. Um,
Oh,
because it just wasn't the same band. I mean, it. I don't know. We had this view that we would like to have been more like the Beatles and been a bit sort of musical. And I
oh,
think
yeah, yeah.
that sort of got rejected. I think that was one of the reasons why we felt quite angry because we thought, well, what's what's wrong with us? Why don't you like us? We think we're great. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it was everything sort of changed for us when we moved into London, and I think Paul had seen the Pistols play, and I think that took a different view um, for the direction of his lyrics for a start,
Yeah.
and I think it sort of focused the band on what we felt that we were going to become really, I suppose. So it wasn't that those early tapes they were pretty dreadful. So looking back on it, we can understand now why record companies weren't interested. So because it was a completely different band, different sound, everything
Yeah.
was totally different. And I think we had a different lineup as well at that time. There was me and two other guys. Bruce wasn't involved in those very early days.
Oh, I see.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
so yeah, it was totally different.
But what happened to those demo tapes? Has anyone still got them or?
Yeah, I mean, they are about. I think they're sort of been bootlegged about over the years.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
uh, but they've never been sort of officially released.
Officially, yeah. Yeah.
It's probably a good thing actually. But, I mean,
Well,
if you ever heard them, you'd know why. I mean, it's they. I mean, this is you're talking about a very young band still learning how to sort of, put stuff together and as far as arrangements go and sound and it was at very early attempts, let's say, at being a band.
yeah, yeah. I've got a question from a friend of mine called Dale Jowett. He's in a band called Gene Go Solo, which they're from New Mills in Derbyshire. His question is, in I think it's 1977. He said, "Do you remember dropping your drumstick at the end of All Around the World on the Mark Bolan? I think it's a Mark Bolan TV show.
Yes, I do.
Do
Yeah,
you, do you remember that one?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I do. Yeah, it was quite embarrassing, really. It was literally within the last bar or something of the song. So, um, yeah. I'd hope everybody had forgotten that, but it is the fear of all drummers that you drop your stick at some point. There you go.
I actually searched for it on YouTube because I didn't know about that because we didn't have the Mark show in the Philippines. So I searched it on YouTube and I saw it. And he also said, what did you and the other band members think of that incident? So, like, was it's not one of
Well,
your sort of like fond memories or something?
no, no. I mean, it was unusual because it was live. I mean, we didn't mime. Most television in those days, you mimed when you went on, but that one was actually live in the TV studio, and I think we said, "Oh, we'll do it again," and they went, "Oh yeah, we can do it again in a bit later," and they never did.
Oh,
I mean, I do remember the stick went up and it never came back down again, and God knows where it went, but it was literally right at the end of the song, so there's
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I managed to finish the song with one stick, and that was it. It was no big deal, really.
yeah. You didn't get so like reprimanded by were you reprimanded by the others or something? No.
I don't think anybody actually noticed it until afterwards. It was
Yeah.
really.
You toured America a lot, didn't you? But apparently, you sort of like I don't know if this is sort of like you blew your chances of breaking through America because America is quite big and it's always difficult for British sort of like bands and acts to break through in America. But in the book it says that Paul Weller didn't want to do any interviews with the with the journalists. Um, but then they want to sort of like just ask either you or Bruce Foxton instead of Paul Weller, so at least the journalists can talk to the Jan about
Well,
your
on that
book.
particular occasion, that comes from a guy called Brian Morrison. He was their publisher, and and he's a sort of was he's unfortunately no longer with us. He's a well-respected sort of publisher. He was the publisher for Pink Floyd and went on to sort of co-manage Wham and what have you. And so he was in the States. He'd come over to see us, and there was the guys from Rolling Stone and various other magazines waiting in the corridor to talk to us.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd seen these guys out there. He knew they were waiting, and he went up to Paul and he said to you should go and talk to these people. It's because it's vitally important that the Rolling Stone magazine especially
Yeah.
was a very important magazine in the States, and Paul just absolutely refused to go out there and speak to them. I don't actually recall the incident myself, but they were quite pissed off about this.
Oh,
It's quite an affront for somebody not to go and um, you know, I don't know what the reasons were. I mean, Paul didn't like America anyway. That he was always very anti-American back in the days. He didn't like touring over there, um, and so it was always hard work for him, I think, because he never took to the idea of touring the States.
yeah.
Um, and I do remember Brian Morrison's, thinking, well, this is it. If you're not gonna, bother to talk to the American press, you've blown it. That's it really for. They don't forget this sort of thing. I mean, you don't often get that opportunity. It's tough enough to try and break America anyway, but to sort of make it worse for yourself by refusing to talk to the mainstream press in America is
Yeah.
just almost suicidal. So that is a real shame. I mean, I don't know. Paul's attitude on a lot of this was quite naive in that respect. I don't know whether he thought he was. I really don't know what his thinking was on that respect, but it was a gross mistake
Yeah.
not to even sort of say hello to them or whatever. It's so yeah, it's a shame. It's a real shame.
You still made it big there though, didn't you? The Jam were still big in America, or it still is, I think.
I think it took a while uh, for the Jam to sort of get through to the American public in general. Um, I it, well, I mean, we never. I wouldn't say we were big in America, really. the first time we went over there, John had signed our rights over to an American management, which wasn't a particularly good idea. It was one of his blunders, one of his many blunders,
Yeah.
management wise. And so we were put on this American tour with bands like Angel, Bebop Deluxe, Blue Oyster Cult, but we were at the bottom of the bill. This American management had decided that this was what we wanted to do, what we should be doing, and so we were doing big 30,000 seaters, but we were fourth or fifth on the bill, right at the bottom of the bill.
Oh, right.
So these people weren't necessarily there to see us.
Yeah.
But it was a numbers thing. Let's get the band in front of as many people as possible in America to try and help break it. But because we, Paul in particular, did not like touring America, it wasn't a plan that went down particularly well. So I don't know why John even negotiated this deal, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most of the pressure came from the record company. The record company were pretty much calling the shots as far as management of the band were going at the time. And I think it was probably from them that they said, well, look, because it would have been a great idea had we have made some sort of inroads into America for selling records, etc. So it was probably from because of that, because the management was, to be in all honesty, was taken care of by Polydor Records. That's why we ended up in that particular scenario. I mean, it did, as we had to buy ourselves out of this American management later on because it just wasn't working for us, and Paul didn't want to tour over there, and etc. It's a real dilemma when it comes to touring America, because you've either got to throw in all the other territories and just concentrate on America, which we didn't really want to do. We didn't want to give up touring in the UK or around Europe. So we had a lot of work on our plate. We were doing really well in Europe. Our second biggest market was Canada, believe it or not, and obviously there was Japan and stuff. So you have to sort of prioritize at some point where you're going to place yourself. So that was all part of the story as well.
Right. Well, you talk about the European market. There's a festival in the Netherlands, because the first time I went to see you in Roncon, I can't remember the year. I think it was 2019 or 2018. I had some records and CDs and posters for you to sign, and one of them was actually this bootleg CD of Pinkpop festival, your Pinkpop performance in the Netherlands. And you probably don't remember this, but you said to me during during the Q&A portion, you should ask me, or I should ask you about the Pinkpop performances, because you said that you've got lots of good memories or stories to tell about Pinkpop. But I
do remember the Pinkpop festival, probably for all the wrong reasons, actually.
Oh, right. I was really shy to sort of ask you back then. So can I ask you now? So if any stories about Pinkpop Festival?
Well, I think we'd finished a UK date. I'm not quite sure where. And the tour manager, who'd organised all our touring dates and what have you, he stayed around my house the night before, and we were going to fly out to the Pinkpop Festival. And me and him used to like having a drink, so we stayed up all night drinking red wine, and we got through God knows how many bottles of red wine, 6 or 7 bottles, probably more bottles of red wine over the whole night. Didn't go to sleep, woke up, and then the next morning we had to leave to go to the airport. So we drank the last bottle of wine on the way to the airport, got there late, missed the plane, spent another hour and a half in the bar, until we finally got on a plane to go to the Pink Pop Festival. Luckily, we arrived a day early because we would, we had the gig wasn't until the day after.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, we were just outrageously drunk, and I think I do remember that I was still suffering from a hangover at the Pink Pop Festival when we actually eventually did play. I mean, it was a big festival for a lot of years. I don't know whether it's still going, but I remember turning up there, and I think the Kinks were playing when we actually arrived. But yeah, I mean, I just remember the whole thing because I had a thick head for the whole of the time that we were there. But so yeah, that was sort of my memory of that show. But I mean, it was a fantastic festival because it was people used to come from all over Europe and go to that, and
Yeah.
Because obviously you can do that in Europe. You can get in your car and just drive. But
Yeah, because it's like America, isn't there? It's all like massive. The mainland Europe is all like big, so like place as well. So anybody from like European countries can just go to the Netherlands and see you at Pink Pop. But I'm surprised that you actually still remember after being so like drunk. So were you so like able to play as normal?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't unusual. I mean, drinking was a big pastime of us so we were quite used to that really. It's just one of those things. I mean, we didn't have when you're on the road, you don't get a lot of time to yourself, and when you do, it's generally in a hotel bar after the show late at night, and that's when you can sort of let your hair down, and just relax. So because you can't go out, you can't do anything because you're usually in a strange place, and what have you. So yeah, you know what they say about being on the road. It's not being on the road that kills you; it's the parties.
Oh,
So that was generally true then, and it probably still is true now.
yeah. There's a really good like part in that book where it says that the fans will actually come for you after the gig or whatever, and then they will take you to another bar or another sort of like party, and then you just carry it on because you normally sort of like the last person to leave. I suppose being a drummer, you've got lots of things that you need to but unlike with the guitarist or a singer, they only have to put the guitar in the case and then they can leave. But with the drummer, you have to sort of like make sure that you've got everything. So there's a really nice part in that book where apparently the fans will go back into the venue or something and then just take you out so you can drink some more or something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that we had guys that took care of our equipment, so that wasn't too much of a problem. But yeah, I mean, there was often occasions when, because we were quite open with the fans back in those days. If they wanted to get into sound checks or whatever, some of them used to find out where we were staying, and turn up at the hotels. And it wasn't really much of a problem. It did start to become a bit of a problem as our sort of fan base grew. But yeah, there was always we got to know a lot of these guys who would follow us around. They would not just go to one town; they would follow us all over the place. And of course, a lot of fans used to come over to Europe in coach trips and what have you. So yeah, it was a bit of a sort of a community thing in some way.
Yeah.
But it's all very nice. It's all very mostly very friendly.
Yeah. Is it true that there will always be like a fight at the end of every gig? Do you get that?
Not always. I mean, there was in especially in London, I suppose, in the very early days, in sort of a 78, 79, there was a lot of factions going on. There was like the skinheads and the mods and the punks and what have you. There were people who were out to cause trouble. So we used to hear about these things, but we never got involved in it.
Oh, so none of you got hurt at
No,
all?
no. I mean, we were sort of shielded from a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
for obviously there, but we did used to hear about these sort of tribal fights going on between various factions.
Oh,
But I think that sort of calmed down a little bit after sort of 1979, 1980. It sort of I think when punk started to die away and the whole skinhead thing was calming down as well. I suppose it was going up a level. It was becoming less violent, less sort of energetic at the gigs, and but I mean that was I think that was just part of the British culture, really. There was almost like the sort of football thing, the hangover from that, really.
Yeah, yeah. I've got two drumming questions because I think I've mentioned it to you before that I'm not really technically into drums, but I do love drummers, but not the technical side of it. But I've got two drumming questions. One from Spence Roberts. Spence is a drummer of a band called The Leaking Machine. I don't know if you've heard of it, but he said that you are one of his absolute favorites. And he wanted to know how you recorded drums in the studio live. Is it live or not, or with or without click? And he also wanted to know, did it get easier to record with the jam in the studios as the albums progresses?
Well, for a start, we always tried to record as much live as possible. It's kept the energy levels up in the recordings rather than overproduce it. I think that's one important thing to mention. I never used a click track. When I was practicing on my own, I always used to play along to other records because that sort of disciplines you with having your own internal click track that you play to, in your head. I think that's very important to get that sorted out as a drummer. You're setting the tempo and the pace, and to keep that register going. That's but no, never play to a click track. I mean, in fact, I'd easily say 99% of the drums that were recorded with the jam were done start to finish. There was no dropping in or doing half of it and coming back or replacing bits and pieces. We used to literally record the whole thing from start to finish, and the drums, that was it. You were well rehearsed up. There were obviously overdubs with the bass and the guitar and vocals and various other things that are layered on afterwards. But for like I say, 99% of the time, the drums were done from start to finish, and it's a fairly sort of straightforward live performance.
Wow, amazing.
I mean, that's what we were used to. That's what we were. We were a live band.
Yeah,
So it wasn't too difficult to sit down in a studio and to do it that way.
Yeah. The second drumming question that I've got is from Steve Roberts. No relation to Spence, but Steve Roberts is the singer of 16 Tambourines. He said you're a legend, boss drummer. He said that the Jam is his favorite band, and he's seen you 7 or 8 times. You're a great live act, he said. His question is, the drum fill on Town Called Malice that brings everything back in feels like it's on a knife edge. Was it a thought out piece, or did it just happen?
No, it's obviously it's done on purpose. That sort of it's a way of expressing it so that the dynamics build and fade and build again during that roll. I mean, it's sort of emulating something that's rattling towards you in a sort of chaotic fashion, but keeping it disciplined. If you can imagine that, so that it gives it. I think it gives it this sort of energy to play it like that. It's not just a straightforward roll. It's not just accelerating itself in. It's actually sort of really thundering at you, but it's giving it some sort of looseness, because what I was trying to do was to bring the dynamic back a little and then reassert it again. If you listen to that roll, it starts off and then it sort of backs off a little and then it takes off again. So it's given it some sort of dynamic, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I always like to experiment with things like that, because it puts life into something rather than mechanically doing it. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, because he also said that the drum roll into the last verse is so out there. That's what he said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's putting emotion into it. I think that's the thing that you've got to try and do.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned earlier, 1982, I find it really sad, but it's very fascinating, and I think I would really recommend anyone who's into the Jam to get a copy of it, because towards the end, it doesn't really tell you or doesn't really give you the real reason why the Jam ended, and it's sort of like made you think that it's in a relation, like if you're in a relationship and then one of you just said, well, we have to finish, it's not you, it's me, something like that, and then a few months later you find out that it's actually going out with someone else. That's how it felt like to me, and I was sort of like, after reading that book, I just felt really, really sad. But, so so the end of the Jam, and so like the start of the Style Council, um could you have sort of like maybe adapted to this, because it's a different sort of like uh style or a genre or something, but could you have, you and Bruce Foston, could you have sort of like adapted to that style of music?
I think the Jam were evolving all the way from Inner City right the way through. All the albums were different. We were experimenting with different sounds, and I think we were evolving as a band anyway. So there was nothing to stop us continuing to do that, to evolve.
Yeah.
So I think there was that. There was also the fact that we weren't actually short of ideas, or you know, I think that because we were sort of constantly evolving, I don't see any reason why we couldn't have carried on doing that. So I think that myself and Bruce think the same, that there was at least another 2 albums in us.
Yeah.
Because we were at the height of our powers, if you like. We were still selling records. The shows were really good. The band never sounded so good live. So I don't see that there was any argument really that we'd come to an end musically. I don't think we'd run out of ideas or inspiration or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I think, personally speaking, I think there was another reason why Paul decided to jump ship. I don't think it was musical. It certainly wasn't personal. We hadn't fallen out with each other.
Yeah.
As far as selling records and selling shows, that wasn't a problem. We were still doing really, really well there. So I've just come to the conclusion over the years that I think it was probably to do with the way that the band was managed, that didn't really help things.
Okay. Yeah.
There was a lot of mismanagement going on, which I think didn't sort of help the situation at all. And I think there was a lot of questions that were beginning to be asked that I think sooner or later would have to have been answered. So I think Paul knew that and decided to jump ship before having to sort of face that, really, which is a real shame.
Yeah, it was, because I mean there's still some sort of like angry lyrics there. I mean, being the Jam being so like the angry young man of pop. I mean, even at the Style Council, they had some sort of like angry so like lyrics in their songs as well. Although I can't imagine so like you and Bruce Foston so like doing the Long Hot Summer video though.
No, exactly. Don't forget there was a couple of things to remember. I mean, some of the songs that were Jam songs were carried over into and sort of released as Style Council numbers. That was one thing that happened. I mean, I remember Bruce saying to me, like a couple of years after the band had split, we went out, had some lunch together, and he said, we were talking about this, and he said, well, if the Jam was going to evolve into the Style Council, he thinks that he probably would have left
Oh,
because it just wasn't really a direction that. I'm not a big fan of the Style Council, never have been. I think they lost a lot of content. I don't think the songs were quite as good. It was all very flat musically compared to the Jam. I think what the Jam had was unique, and it just seemed a real shame that I don't know. There was something very much missing from the Style Council's sound and production and direction, which was a bit of a shame because I don't know whether it was because Paul had felt that he'd run out of steam with his songwriting or whatever, but I personally don't think he ever wrote. He's obviously a good songwriter, but
yeah, yeah.
there's just some way that it just didn't come across in the Style Council. It all seemed a little bit wet.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I must confess though that coming originally from the Philippines, a lot of sort of like teenagers, like people my age, back then, we were more familiar with the Style Council music, and then we just got on to the Jam after we found out about Paul Weller. But now
Mm-hmm.
looking back, I think it's got something to do with not making it big in America because we're very much sort of like influenced. I think in the Philippines, we're very much influenced on what was sort of like happening in America. So if um I have a feeling that maybe the Style Council made it bigger in America than the Jam.
Well, I don't think so.
No.
Just talking to I know the guys at the record company and talking to them. I mean, they were having real problems selling the Style Council anywhere, really.
Oh,
So if you just want to look at numbers, I don't think they made anywhere near as many inroads in the States,
yeah.
like the Jam did. Even
Well,
though the Jam didn't really sort of cut it in the States, and I'm surprised because because Paul doesn't like America and etc. But anyway,
yeah.
there you go.
Well, it could be sort of like the MTV generation as well, because like Sing, Long Hot Summer, and Ever Changing Mood, and then of course they were on Live Aid as well. Um, the Style Council sort of like did a performance there. So I think that's the reason why they were sort of like. I mean, there's quite a lot of the Jam fans in the Philippines now. But back then, my generation or my age was sort of like we're more into the Style Council thing.
Right,
And
right.
because it's like the new wave, the sort of like the new wave generation. Because I think the Jam is more sort of like the punk.
Well, New Wave had sort of really come in sort of 1980, that sort of thing. I mean, punk sort of
Yeah,
starting to die off, didn't it?
yeah,
It
yeah,
didn't really have the longevity that I think that a lot of bands, um, like say for instance like Blondie or the Police that had come out of that, or even the Stranglers, they managed to sort of outlast the initial punk thing. I think punk was a good flag to wave to get the attention in the early days of 77 and 78, but I think it had run out of momentum pretty much by that time. Um, it's
yeah, yeah.
it's a bit of a sad thing, but I think the whole punk thing um, was brilliant because it gave a lot of artists a sort of launch pad for their
Mm,
careers in the UK, which then obviously got picked up, press wise throughout the world.
yeah,
Um, but I think a lot of bands, wanted to sort of evolve and move on and almost move away from that sort of punk image, which I think they did. It's like like everything in music, really. You don't want to stay standing still too long. You become boring. It's
yeah. That's true. Yeah, yeah. Um. So when the Jam ended, you didn't stop drumming though, did you? You still carried on with other bands.
Yeah,
Because from your Discogs entry, I actually found out you were in various other bands like Time UK,
yeah.
Sharp, and the Highliners. And in fact, when I looked at the Highliners Discogs entry, you've released several albums.
Yeah, the Time UK was the first thing that I got involved with. I mean that I put that together. We had Danny Custo from the Tom Robinson Band, guitarist from Tom Robinson Band. There was Nick South from Sniffing the Tears. You know, so it was quite a mixed match of people in that. It was we didn't actually manage to secure much in the way of a decent record deal. We went from one record company to another record company, and I think the 80s, music was changing a lot, and I think, to be honest, we failed to change as a band. We didn't seem to sort of cut it, unfortunately, and we didn't get the backing we would have liked to have got. So that didn't last long, which was a shame. I mean, I got involved in other things. I ran a recording studio for several years, and it was from there that I started managing the band called the Highliners.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, they had a top 40 hit, and I ended up playing drums with them, etc. And that was great fun. I really enjoyed being in that band. It's not my sort of music. That was sort of psychobilly music, but it was fun, and it was high energy, and it was I put a lot of work into it. Got them a tour and the record deals and stuff. So and then obviously I had various other things that I'd been doing. So yeah, I mean it's and of course then I started writing the books about the Jam and stuff. So I don't know, it's never been anything planned as far as the career was concerned. I was always seemed to be getting involved in something else.
Yeah, yeah. And you also did From the Jam with Bruce Foxton as well.
Yeah, I mean, I started the band called The Gift with Russell Hastings, which was really just to revisit the Jam songs. I wanted to sort of, go back and do that. And then Bruce found himself out of Stiff Little Fingers. So we said to him, well, why don't you come along and do a couple of numbers with The Gift, which he did. And then he loved it so much, he thought, we'll do half the set with him. And then he came on full board, came on and did the whole show with us. He was in a band, I think, called Casbah Club, and they weren't particularly doing very well. So he left them and joined us in The Gift. And then we changed the name from The Gift to From the Jam. But it was beginning to become like a sort of tribute act. All we ever did was go round and round playing Jam stuff all the time, which was not really what I wanted to do. I just wanted to revisit the songs, do it for 2 or 3 years, and not become boring, and that was that. And then Bruce became quite hard work to work with. He was just, well, he was being a bit of a prima donna over the whole thing, and it wasn't fun, and we weren't making any money. So I think, well, I'm off.
So you're not doing From the Jam now?
No, I haven't done that for a long time. I mean, I don't know whether they're still going or whatever, but it was becoming very sort of tedious doing that. Because it wasn't the Jam. There are some very good tribute bands out there playing Jam music. So it just seemed a bit sort of pointless, really, to keep doing it. So it wasn't really going anywhere as far as I was concerned. Apart from sort of just becoming like a sort of tribute act. So I left that.
Yeah, I think they're still going, because I still see like adverts for it, like From the Jam tour.
I think it's only Russell now, is it? I don't know.
Also, not even Bruce Foxton is
I don't
part of it.
think
Okay.
I might be mistaken. I don't think he's still involved in it. I don't know.
Yeah. So asking you about your drumming, because we mentioned earlier that incident in the Mark show. So do you twirl a lot when you when you play the drums, or do you sort of like do tricks like throwing sticks up and then catching it?
No, I don't I never really got into all of that sort of stuff, really. I mean, I can do it, but it's just I don't really see no, I don't really get into any of that. No.
And for you are a drumming legend. Do you have drumming heroes yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when I was growing up and I was looking to sort of learn as much as possible, I would look to other drummers. Obviously, people like Ian Pace from
Oh,
Deep Purple. I think you've
yeah,
got a lot of
yeah,
respect for him. He's um, because he's just a great technician. The way he puts stuff together, um, things like the way that Ringo Starr would play drums on for the Beatles. Obviously, you know,
yeah,
he was very thoughtful, very imaginative. Um, he always had this great attitude of it was the song was the star, and so he would figure out ways of doing something different on each song that suited the song. So he's quite creative in that respect, and I think that was a good lesson to learn
yeah, yeah.
because he's actually, despite what Lennon might have said about him, he was actually a very talented drummer. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yes.
yeah. So there was always something to learn from somebody about how they approached doing things. Either the way that they played or the way that they would approach their recording techniques, that sort of thing. So yeah, those two guys have come to mind immediately. There was anybody really that I would see play, and I thought had something that I could plagiarize or whatever or learn from. Uh,
Yeah.
was always good. Like I say, you can always just go and watch another drummer play, and there'll be something that they do which is worth learning from.
How about young drummers? Have you seen like a current band or even so like from the 90s or 2000?
I think there was a period during the 80s where drum machines came in and drummers sort of fell off. They fell by the wayside. It wasn't
Oh
very
yeah,
friendly to
yeah.
play drums. So it was good to see, other drummers getting back into it, during the 90s and when bands started to realize the value of real drummers rather
Yeah.
than machines. I think, we're getting out of that sort of disco side of things. Um, so yeah, that was quite nice to see that there was this sort of revival of real bands. I think a lot of that came from America, really. Um, but by that time I wasn't really watching drummers in the same way. Um,
Right, yeah.
I wouldn't say that I knew everything that there was to learn because I don't think you ever get to the point where you feel that there's you've learned enough. There's
Yeah.
always something else to
Yeah.
to listen to.
Do you still go to gigs a lot or you don't go to
Not
gigs
not
anymore?
too many. No, I mean, there's sometimes I'll go along and see like a lot of local gigs. A lot of the smaller ones I find quite interesting, especially when you
Mm-hmm.
see young bands, really trying to make their mark. I like to go and see that. I'm not particularly fond of going to great big shows, really.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, local things I think I quite like to sort of pop my head in. Really, you can see people really fighting their corner at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever had any accidents in your years of drumming? Like, have you hurt yourself or fallen over the chair or a drum stool or something?
I mean, no, years. Well, the only one that I can think of was years ago. I had a car accident
Oh,
where I broke my right ankle, but that didn't stop me from playing drums. I had my foot in plaster, but
oh dear.
um, we still went on and did some shows. Um, it's a bit restricted, but if we've got a gig and then you can still do it. So
Oh yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
was the only time that I can think of where any injury has actually ever stopped me from doing anything.
yeah. Oh, but also, do you have any advice for aspiring drummers out there?
Um, Obviously, practice is key. Like with any instrument, I think even when you even the top drummers would still regularly practice every day to keep your memory muscle going. Um, and I think you have to try and you constantly have to try and push the envelope to discover new ways of doing things. Um, I think as soon as you rest on your laurels, then I don't know. It's quite a dangerous thing to do, but yeah, and I think you just have to keep your mind active and keep learning, really.
Yeah. Peter Lawney actually sort of like joked that he wanted me to ask you if you'd teach him your style of drumming. Now,
I don't know whether you can teach a style as such. Uh, I mean, all I can say is that I was very much influenced by a lot of other drummers, but I could never play like they did. I think you have to make your own style. You have to learn your best way that you do things,
Yeah.
rather than sort of trying to sort of necessarily strictly copy what other people do. But it's nice to hear when people said, "Oh, I've heard you do this, that, and the other," and I tried to do it, but I can't quite. But I did find my own way of doing it, and I think that's the way to go, because it's then natural to you, and then because of that, you are creating your own style.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Well, I've got just a couple of just quick questions for you before I let you go. What do you think of Paul Weller's? It's not very nice comment about Robert Smith.
I don't know what was his comment. What was
It's all like calling him a sort of like a fat thing. It was in a magazine, what's it called now, Record Collector magazine, and I thought, because I've always thought, like, seen him, I've always thought of him as like a nice person, but it wasn't very nice of him to say things like that about Robert Smith. That I think calling him, first of all, calling him fat.
Well, I don't see how it's got anything to do with anything, really. You know, I mean, I've seen some drummers play that it's about what they do, really. That's the important thing. I think it's almost a sort of childish remark to make
It
about
was,
something,
yeah.
really. I wouldn't take much notice of it. You know, it's really it's doesn't deserve the credit.
No. And
No, ignore him. Ignore him.
and lastly, and I'm sure everyone has sort of like asked you this, will the Jam ever get back together?
I don't think we will. I think when that momentum was broken, when Paul decided to leave, I think that was it. I think the other reason is that I don't think he could ever really pick it up and start, you know, as, again. I think that had been sort of destroyed. I mean, personally speaking, I think when the band split, or when Paul decided that he was going to leave, I remember it just seems like a sort of an act of musical vandalism, really, to sort of smash it up and to because it can't be. I don't think it could be put back together again. For whatever reasons, it's just the way that the band had formed and evolved, and the direction that we had this sort of momentum which was taking us forward, and we etc. And I think to sort of to try and pick up the pieces, I don't think that would be the case. And certainly, if there was ever a time when we could have done that, it's gone. It's long gone. Which unfortunately, I mean, I think if we ever got back together again and did anything, all we would do is just go out and play some of the old hits, and then that would be that. I don't think it would be a proper reform, or it would certainly not have any direction.
No new music. No. It's sad, isn't it? It just feels sad. But
Yeah, it is. I mean, I you know, I think the only regret that I have about the Jam Days is that I wish we could have brought it to a more satisfactory conclusion, rather than sort of just trashing it in the way that it was. You know, we could have gone on for a couple more years, and you know, and had we sort of called it a day at a more logical time, then fine, because nothing ever lasts forever. You know, you obviously everybody can understand that.
yeah, of course, yeah.
But I think to sort of destroy something like that is it's just, well, it was just wanton destructiveness,
Yeah.
really. There's, I'm not quite sure what was going on in Paul's mind, but there was something very, very wrong going on. I think more to do with what was going on in the background rather than actually with the band itself.
When was the last time you had contact with Paul Weller?
I actually bumped into him in 1983 at a gig in the audience, and just said hello to him, and that was it. That was the last time.
That long? 40,
Yeah.
40 years?
Yeah. I
Oh
mean,
my
myself and Bruce tried very hard to stay in touch with him, but he couldn't bring himself to speak to us or look us in the eye or anything. So yeah, very sad.
Oh.
Especially after all the things that we went through and the success that we had and what have you, that he took that particular attitude, really.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, yeah. I never had a chance to sort of like see the Jam, nor the Style Council, nor Paul Weller. I haven't actually seen Paul Weller live, but well, that's yeah, that's it. It's just live. But anyways, thank you so much for this amazing time that you gave Ask the Drummer. I'm really, really grateful to you. And any book events or gigs or anything?
Yeah, I've got some Q&As. I've got a bit of a break at the moment. I did some of the early in the year. I've got some more coming up in the UK. So yeah, just keep your eye on it. If you go to strangetown.net, there's
okay.
Yeah, there's a list of events on there, so that will be updated when some more Q&As come in, because there's a lot of interest in people, wanting to ask questions that they've been curious about over the last few years, or last 40 years. So yeah, there's your opportunity to sort of get involved, and they're great fun. They're usually quite informative, sort of an informal gatherings. So yeah, keep your eye. I mean, you come along. It's
I hope there'll be anything like Manchester, Liverpool, Runcorn area, so like in the north, the easy for me to sort of like get to, because it's always fun watching you and hearing you sort of like talk about it. And also you always you always sign stuff, and you always sort of like okay for photographs and things. So for fans like me, and for the others, it's always a good opportunity to say hello to you. And
yeah, I think people enjoy those sort of things. I mean, it's there's a few. There's one up in Scarborough, and I think there's one in Leeds coming up.
right,
And I think there might be a book fair called the Air Right in Glasgow as well later on. But yeah, all these things are on strangetown.net, so that's the place to sort of catch up with the when and where.
That's very good, because I'm gonna include that link to the Ask the Drummer page as well, so that people can see and check out the dates of your
Okay, lovely, great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Buckler. I really, really enjoyed chatting to you, and I can't really thank you enough for.
That's lovely. It's great. I mean, it's yeah. No, thanks very much for listening to it all.
Yeah, and enjoy the rest of the weekend, and hopefully see you again soon.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye. Oh my God, how awesome was that? Thank you so much, Mr. Buckler, for guesting on Ask the Drummer. That was just absolutely amazing. I really, really enjoyed that interview. Yeah, and I really can't thank him enough, because he is absolutely amazing. But if you do want to see him in real life, in person, please go to his website, strangetown.net, and you'll find all the dates of when he's going to be doing his Q&As. I've actually booked myself a ticket to see him in Leeds, so hopefully, if you're going to be there in Leeds, say hello, and it would be nice to see you there and talk to you or something, and we'll talk about Mr. Rick Buckler, how brilliant he is. But anyways, yeah, thank you all so much, my dear friends, for your support, for your love and support for Asta Drama. Next week, I'm gonna be back broadcasting live, but it's not going to be on Sunday. It's going to be on Tuesday morning, I think. But yeah, do keep an eye out for the guest announcement post, and we'll tell you who it's going to be, who is our next guest, and what time and what dates exactly. So that's all for now. For me, as always, love music, love life, love drummers, and I hope to see you all next week. Bye for now. Bye.